Hello, Debbie Danowski. I am so pleased to have you with me. And Debbie is a Ph.D. and the author of 5 popular books about weight loss and food addiction, and an associate professor of communication studies at Sacred Heart University. Dr. Danowski has also served as a manager of media relations for a national nonprofit organization, a public relations consultant for a national food addiction treatment center, and public relations coordinator for a Connecticut horse rescue organization. She has many interests. Dr. Danowski holds a PhD from Capella University in Minneapolis, Minnesota, where she researched eating behavior in American film, a master's degree in public communications from Syracuse University, and a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from Sacred Heart University. Dr. Danowski's academic publications include Bet You Can't Eat Just One, Binge Eating Disorder Promotion in American Food Advertising, Media Literacy and Academic Research, April 2019, Volume 2, Number 1. One Size Doesn't Fit All, New Continua of Figure Drawings and their relation to ideal body image, and with some other colleagues. And in addition, Cover to Cover, Contemporary Issues in Popular Women's Magazines. So these are a few of her accomplishments. In addition, her latest book, Why Can't My Child Stop Eating? Central Recovery Press, discusses emotional eating in children. Her other books include The Emotional Eater's Book of Inspiration, 90 Truths You Need to Know to Overcome Your Food Addiction, Why Can't I Stop Eating? Hazelden, co-authored with Dr. Pedro Lazaro, Locked Up for Eating Too Much, also Hazelden, and The Overeater's Journal, also Hazelden. Additionally, Dr. Danowski has written more than 100 articles for national and local publications, including First for Women, Women's Day, and 17 Magazine, and served as, something came up on my screen, sorry, and served as a contributing writer for Fairfield County Home Magazine. Not noted here is the fact that she has been a wonderful board member for foodaddictioninstitute.org, and we are grateful to have her share with us this information for foodaddictioninstitute.org YouTube. So without further ado, could you talk about how you got into these areas of research and study, and put a little note in there about the horses, please?
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And thank you for the nice introduction. I was an overweight child. As far back as I can remember, and it took me many years to figure out what was actually wrong. When I was 23 years old, I went into a food addiction treatment center. I was 328 pounds when I went in, and I was miserable and suicidal. And when I came out, I sort of made it my life's work to educate people about food addiction, to make people aware of the food addiction attitudes in the media and in society. And pretty much everything I've done since then has revolved around food addiction in one way or another. Even in my teaching, I teach a class that's, called food advertising, and I study food advertisements to look at the food addiction behaviors in them. So it's personal, but it's grown professional as well.
And how many years and how have you maintained the changed you?
I have 33 years in recovery from food addiction, and I'm just grateful. I've lost more than half my body weight, and I've maintained a healthy body weight for just about, it took a little while to lose all that weight. So almost the whole 33 years.
Kudos, celebrations.
Thank you.
And one day at a time, perhaps?
Absolutely. There's no other way to do it.
So true. So true from my experience as well. So as far as childhood obesity, it's gotten a lot of attention lately. And what makes your book sort of different from the others? And why did you write the book?
Well,
And
I
would
wrote
you
the
say that, and would you say the title correctly?
it's called Why Can't My Child Stop Eating? And I wrote the book for the child that I was. My parents were food addicts, and during that time, food addiction was not known. There was nothing, when they were growing up, it just barely was alcoholism known, never mind food addiction. And so I wrote the book, and raising a child who's a food addict is heartbreaking. I mean, I was heavy my whole entire childhood, and they didn't know what to do with me. They tried diets and so many different things, and I can't even remember how many diets they were always willing to support whatever it was that might be that thing that would help me to, be a normal weight and live a normal life. And they couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it up until I was 23 years old. And so I wrote that book for parents who might be struggling with that same thing, and also for the children that they're trying to help, because you can try to help a child in so many different ways, and unless that's the one that works for them, you're not going to get anywhere. And I think my book is different because of that. I don't have children. I didn't write it, I wrote it more for the child in a way that would help the child, rather than as a parent telling the child what to do. And there's a different approach there, because I know as a child, when I was told to do something, and even as an adult now, I don't necessarily respond well to being told what to do. And I think that children are like that too. And it's important that, that parents understand that. And I think from the child's perspective, with tips to help the parents, it's just a unique approach.
Well, that brings up in the chapter, What Food Isn't, you suggest that parents consider rethinking the way their child plays. And would you explain what you mean by that? That's an interesting take.
Sure. Well, when I was growing up, we had the Betty Crocker oven, and we had all these things, all these playthings that may have revolved around food, and they still have little kitchens, and they have, Barbie's kitchen, or, I'm not sure about boys. I don't know much about boys. I'm a girl, but they have all sorts of toys, the Happy Meals that have a prize in them, and things that advertise food companies, even Cracker Jacks with, prizes in them. And I just think that it's very helpful if parents consider where these prizes or toys are coming from. Even now, when I was growing up, we didn't have McDonald's where you go and you can play on the gym, whatever the gym is, the play area. And I think that bringing your child to something like that is an open invitation to create a child who's overweight. Even if it's an activity, whatever they're going to do in that playscape isn't going to balance out the food that they're going to eat there. And so I really think that food is food. It's nourishment for a child's body, for anybody's body, but it's not a plaything. It's not a toy. It's not something that they should associate with having fun. Fun should be fun for itself, not because food is involved.
In that next chapter, What Food Is, you point out that advertisers try to associate that fun and play, which you just mentioned, and with the high calorie and unhealthy substances that some people call food. What can parents do about this?
Well, I think having a conversation is a good starting point if the child is old enough. There's a cereal commercial and it's a cereal that's very high in sugar, and they associate the playing team sports with eating this cereal before you go out and play these team sports. And they show, average weight children running around after eating this cereal. And if you eat too much of that cereal, it's not really that you're going to be average weight. And having that conversation with your child, saying that this isn't reality. They show, children and adults dancing with ice cream products. And, it's important to have a conversation about what kinds of food fuel your body? What will eating too much of this type of food do for you? And if your child's not old enough, then I really would advocate for limiting their screen time, limiting what they watch. If you can get something, forward through the commercials, because there've been a lot of studies done, then the amount of commercials for high sugar foods in children's television programming is dangerous. There's no other way to say it. They're trying to make changes, and there've been attempts, but they're still there. And it's sneaky too. And sometimes these commercials, might look like it's healthy food, but it really isn't. And so I think it's, starting with, if you start from a young age to talk to your child about, this is good for your body, this isn't good for your body, this is what happens, it makes all the difference in the world.
And how early is not too early?
Well, I think a child can understand. That's a good question, but I think a child can understand good and bad, before the age of 5. Probably, it depends on the child and how they're developing too. But I think the concepts of good and bad, this is good for you, and this is bad for you. That's not a hard concept. And, maybe it will be hard once they get into school and everybody else is eating every other thing. But if you start before they get into school, then you might have a shot at really influencing their behavior, because once they go off to school or they go off with their friends and they're older, you really have a tough time controlling what happens to them when they're not in your house. As much as when they're in your house, you can just not have that food there and, not make a big deal out of it. Just don't have the food there. That's all.
After all, parents are the ones who bring home the food generally.
Absolutely.
And some of us have the idea that we want our children to have those things that we as food addicts cannot have, because there's something virtuous about giving it to the children. What is your take on that?
There's nothing virtuous about giving it to the children. And I think people do that with their pets too. They do that with I think that, and even their significant others, I think that it really is worth working through those issues on your own and in your head, so that you don't give children the food that you can't eat, because there's a reason you can't eat it, and why would you want your child to eat that?
And if there are children, they may have genetic and epigenetic relationship to us. And so another reason.
Yeah. Right. You're creating a food addict.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about the horses? I'll slip this in here. Tell us a little bit about the horses and how you feed the horses.
Well, I started volunteering after I had been in recovery for a while, and it takes a while when you get into when I got into recovery, it took me a while to understand and learn about myself, because the first many years are about establishing a pattern and making sure the food's in its place, making sure my recovery is working, and I realized that I had always had this dream to be around horses. My parents had taken us horseback riding when we were real little kids, but I really wanted to have horses in my life, and I had brain surgery that affected my balance, so I was not able to ride, and still am not able to ride. But I contacted this horse rescue. It was called Horse of Connecticut in Washington, Connecticut, and I contacted them, and they offered volunteer opportunities, and they trained their volunteers to work with horses. And I was also teaching an advertising and public relations class, and I wanted the students to advertise and promote this organization. So it all blended together, where I did it for my teaching and for myself. And I volunteered there for several years, and I met a pony named Cooper, and he looked at me, and ironically enough, he in the horse world, he was very similar to a food addict, and I had to work very hard to learn how to feed him so that he would not. Horses, when they eat too much sugar, they founder, and that means that their bone rotates. It's very, very painful, and a lot of horses don't survive that. And he had already done that once. He was not rideable, and he had a lot of problems. And I knew I took a lot of classes to try to help him what to eat, and I figured out something that he could eat. And we had 6 great years together, and I adopted him. You have to have 2 horses. You can't have just one because they're herd animals and they get real scared by themselves. So I adopted him, and I adopted Butterscotch. She was a giant Premarin mare, which is, she was recovering from being used. They keep them pregnant and they use their urine for hormone replacement. She was recovering from that. Cooper was abused, and they both had issues, and we just had so much fun for, years. And then Bo came along, who was 25 years old when I got him. And the 4 of us together, just, it changed my life. It gave me something I never had as a child, which was a hobby that was active, being involved in something that was active. I walked them as much as I could. Sometimes, I lived in a little bit of a rural area, and they would run. I would let them go and they would run, and then I'd have to walk after them and chase them. And it was, it's kind of what I encourage in the book too. I encourage parents to let their children develop hobbies and interests that will take them away from food. When I was growing up, I read and I watched television, but those were more escape things than they were hobbies. Being out there with the horses and all the animals. I have rabbits, I have cats, and being out there with the animals, it really changes everything. And I started a nonprofit for senior animals, because senior horses who can't be ridden don't have good endings. And I can't help all of them, but I can help. I've helped a few, and I'm grateful for that. And if children have outside interests, just like adults, then they're not so focused on food and eating.
And so thank you for sharing about the horses. How many do you have right now of your animals?
I have, 9 animals right now. I have 4 rabbits, 3 cats, and 2 horses.
And the horses, when there's lightning, could you describe what they experience?
When there's lightning, yeah, they experience fear. They have sheds that they go in, and lightning. Extreme weather is very scary for the horses that I have now. Have not been abused to the extent that the first 3 were. So these are a bit calmer, but the other 3 would just get scared, and sometimes they run around. It depends, on what the weather, how close that weather is to them.
And do they want you nearby?
I can, yes and no, because you can go out there and you can talk to them, but sometimes they just get so scared that it doesn't matter. And you don't really want to be around them when they're running around scared. So yes, I do go out there and say, it's okay, it's okay. But if they're that scared, they really won't even hear you.
Yeah. Sometimes that's like people too.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so.
Yes.
Well, could you talk a little more about that long list of family activities that don't include food and eating? So might you share some of those?
Sure. I think for me, the top one there and will always be is, take a hike, take a walk, go to a park, take a walk. And that, I think, not only moves your body, but it gets you out in nature, which is very healing. And I think, there's a whole list in the book, and probably I don't even remember half of them because my memory isn't so good from all the sugar that I had. But it's anything that's active, bike riding, if that's your thing, bowling, miniature golf, anything that you can get out there and do with your child that isn't, even horseback riding, a small child can go on a pony. And I have a niece, and she started from when she was young. She rode for many years up until she went to college. And, that really helps to, being around animals also helps develop a lot of other things, like compassion and things in children that are important. But just the activity of it, walk the dog if you have a dog, there's all kinds of things that you can do. So,
and how do these activities help parents help their children? What are the things that come of that? Like, hearing you, I think responsibility, that if children have growing responsibility over their years with animals or others. My mother just gave up. She said, threw up her hands and said, "You guys are not taking care of the dog. We are not having a dog. I am not taking care of the dog." I mean, that was the end of it. And we were sad when the dog went away, but we hadn't been responsible about taking care of that animal. So is that one of the things that helps children and that parents are helping their children grow in? Are there other things?
There are, but I think with the animals, it's tricky because somebody does have to take care of that animal. And so if I think there's better ways to teach children responsibility than to actually get an animal who might not be taken care of. And even if it's something as simple as, making them and especially where food is concerned, a child can, go into the kitchen and make a choice. You can give the child several choices between. You can make them responsible also, where food is concerned, for making a choice between 3 different healthy options, or having them prepare a healthy, whatever it is that they're going to eat for themselves, or involving them in meal preparation. It's sort of like finding sneaky ways to get them to prepare meals in a healthy way and also take responsibility for what they're eating.
My mother used that approach with my father, who was diabetic. She would offer him 3 alternatives, but they were all alternatives that were appropriate given the knowledge of diabetes at that time. So they can be sneaky, but at the same time, effective, very effective. So, well, I wanted to ask you another question with regard to pregnancies. We're finding more and more research that suggests that prior to conception, that parents, both parents, male and female parents, being healthy, or donors, if there are egg donors involved or sperm donors involved, that these people being healthy, appropriate weighted, and a healthy weight, and free from as many of the compulsive behaviors and addictions as humanly possible first. So vaping and marijuana and alcohol and nicotine and high fructose corn syrup and sugar and highly processed foods, substances that look like food, are on the list of the things that if the 2 parents are free of those, then the likelihood for the child is a much healthier offspring, much healthier. And that these are things that make a huge difference in terms of the child's life, because they're implications for kidneys, for heart disease, for other metabolic difficulties, ADHD. No shame, no blame for anyone who's had a child. And these are the outcomes, because we didn't know before. Now we know. Now we know. So what is it that we can do to move forward to help young people early, I mean, as young children, to learn how to feed their baby dolls or their GI Joes or whatever, and how to help them to learn healthier approaches before they come to even sexuality and menarche, because those are the times when so often people get pregnant without knowing that they're going to get pregnant. They haven't planned it. So what are your suggestions for people, young children up through menarche and beyond, for getting healthy children?
I think it's really is about repetition, the same, like these are good foods. These are, foods that are healthy, good and bad if you choose, or healthy and unhealthy, whatever you want to, whatever works for you and your family. But it's really about educating the child to the behaviors that are in the media, because, a lot of times I feel as if we underestimate the power of the media. And, there are experts that say we see between 3,000 and 5,000 advertisements per day. And that's including the little logos that are on our, t-shirts and hats and things like that. But think about the power of that. And then if you have a child who's always on the screen and, those commercials come in, and it really is about limiting what they see, and when they see it, having a conversation about this is, this is not realistic. If you eat a lot of this food, your body isn't going to be able to do these things. Your body won't be able to run around like the kids in the, in the show or on TV, or and if you eat this, how will you feel after? There's a lot of awareness that needs to come. And I think the earlier you can do that and the more you can do that is really important, because it's almost impossible to compete with 3,000, 5,000 advertisements per day. I mean, the power really is, and even on screen, on social media, there are advertisements all over, and they're targeted. So if a child looks up like a McDonald's something or other, then they're going to get all these ads for all this fast food. And they make the food look really good, much better than it does in person. And they add stuff into it that makes you want to eat it even more. So it's really a powerful force in our society. And we need to, start to, in a lot of schools, they offer media literacy education, which is crucial to helping children understand that the images they see in the media are not realistic. And it's not just about food advertising. It's about, even in television shows, in films and things like that. It's really, really important that children know this is not realistic. If you eat that, you're not going to dance around. You're going to feel bloated and sick. And I think that the more we can do that, it really will benefit, put food in its place. I mean, to me, food is not anywhere near where it needs to be in its place. Food is food. It nourishes your body. It doesn't make you happy. It doesn't give you love. It doesn't do all the things that these advertisements show you. You get those from people.
Such an important lesson for all of us, all of us. In the 70s, I was teaching, and I had a friend who was one of the first people using animation and the animated bears, polar bears, to advertise a product. And I invited him to come to my classroom to talk with the students about that process. And it was a fabulous advertisement. It was very successful and very intriguing and enjoyable to watch. And just as you're saying, not valid. That all of the putting those sugary beverages, sweetened beverages into one's body do not make for a body that can do all of the things those bears were saying children would now be able to do. So even all those years ago, that was a ploy to the children. I mean, really, aren't they cute? Aren't they fun watching them dance? So nowadays, oh my gosh, 3,000 to 5,000 instances per day. Mind-boggling, mind-boggling. Well, how do you see allergies to food and problems with food in your own body and the bodies of others around us? How does that, some people talk about food addiction as though it's an allergy to the food, and Theron Randolph and Wrinkle, whose first name I can't remember, I think I knew his grandson, Bert, years later, they talked about specific adaptations to food, and that many of us don't have the capacity to eat the wide ranges of substances that are called food that are now available to us. So are those allergies, or how do you think about them, or how is it best to talk to children about them?
Well, for me, I have my perspective, and my perspective is as a food addict. And I think that it's important that children understand, an allergy to me is something a lot different than an addiction. And I don't know, I guess it would depend on your family, how you would talk to your child. But I think even if children knew, I mean, we teach children, not to drink too much, or, not to smoke. And to me, I think we should put food in that category of, this is dangerous, and allergy doesn't quite do it, in my opinion. I think that because of the power of advertising and all the untrue messages that we see and that children are seeing, I think it needs to be powerful. This will make you sick. Not an allergy does make you sick, but an allergy can also be hives, and that is different to me than, if you eat too much of this, you're going to have diabetes, or you're going to, the different levels of sickness. So I think it needs to be a strong message, this is addictive, this is harmful in this way to your body. This is, and with young children, you clearly have to be, keep it basic. This, you won't feel good after you eat this, or it depends on the child, the age, but I think it needs, yeah, no, I think that it really needs to be a powerful, strong message. To me, the word allergy doesn't make it as strong as it needs to be. Addiction, unhealthy even, is stronger than allergy. Because an allergy is something that you'll have a reaction to, maybe, maybe not. And I'm not saying allergies aren't serious. They absolutely are. But I'm not sure it's accurate either, because I wouldn't consider myself allergic to sugar. I consider myself addicted. And addicted is a much more powerful word to me, and a much more accurate word. That doesn't mean all children are, but if they eat too much, they could trigger something, especially if their parents are food addicts. And when you talk about an addiction, there are life destroying things that happen when you're in that addiction. And I think that's much more powerful and serious. And I think, kids need to be made aware of that. We don't talk about food addiction. We don't educate kids about, any of really any eating disorder kinds of, symptoms or things like that. You really have to search that out. It isn't part of, not like the don't drink, don't smoke sort of a education that's out there. And we had, when I was in junior high, we had what are the dangers of smoking kind of a health class. We never talked about food and eating and healthy eating. And I think it needs to really be part of a curriculum.
We really do need that in our curriculum. So with regard to addiction, how do you talk to a younger child about addiction?
I think for a really younger child, you mostly would say makes you sick, because if they're so young, like 5 or something like that, they understand healthy and sick. They've probably been sick and they get that. But then I think as as they grow up and they grow older, it's more, words like can't stop when I start, in simple, basic terms. And then, when they do get to an age, I don't know what that age is, because kids are more sophisticated today than they were, but I think that there is an age where they can, read stories or listen to things from, people who were addicted to food, or who are, or, even eating disorders, just to make them aware of that.
So important. And the idea of wanting more to get the same effect, and that I feel cranky and hangry when I'm hungry, and not taking care of myself in an appropriate time period. So those are some other things that people generally are talking about now. I recently talked with a young man who had looked at something about the advertising for sugary sweetened beverages, and he had realized that there were a number of calories in those. He'd had an awareness, and he had added up how many cans he had a day, and he had figured out that if he quit drinking all of them for 2 years, that he would lose 140 pounds. And he reported proudly to me that he had 2 years before stopped drinking the sugary sweetened beverages and had now lost 140 pounds. And that's a success story.
Wow.
That's a success story.
Absolutely.
So
it also shows the power of one small change.
And these are the changes that parents can make and the children can make of their own volition even. They can choose, even if their parents are eating differently than they would recommend. I was smoking cigarettes when my sister went through the kind of education about smoking and the dangers of it. She came home and tore up my cigarettes while I would sleep. And I was not a happy camper. But it had an impact on me. Years later, when I did quit smoking, I remembered what she had said and what she had done. So
Mhm.
children can make an impact on parents as well as parents on children. So, well, are there some closing words that you'd like to say, and what you would like to say to children for their impact and the power that they have to make choices?
I think one of the most important things for children to understand is that the choices that they make today affect their lives tomorrow. It might not seem like it, but I know from I never thought when I was eating all that food that it would result in me weighing over 300 pounds. And as a child, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. I wouldn't, I know that there are more overweight children now than there were when I was growing up. And it's not as it's I was teased, I was bullied, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I think if you can make small choices and make small changes and get out there and find things that you're interested in and you like to do, your life's going to be so much better. And I would never want a child to go through what I went through as a child. It was horrendous, and being teased and bullied, and I think to make your life better,
Yeah. Dr. Danowski, Debbie, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure to be here with you, even with our intermittent recording ability. Hopefully our technical person, Ali Batukan, will be able to do miraculous things. And I thank you on behalf of Food Addiction Institute, and my personal gratitude to you for doing it today. Thank you so much. And we are going to put in a pitch for donations to Food Addiction Institute. If you enjoy these YouTubes, please go to our website, foodaddictioninstitute.org, and press the donate button. We appreciate small donations, large donations, and everything in between. Thank you so much for supporting Food Addiction Institute in our endeavors to get messages of hope out about food addiction and recovery. Thank you so much. Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.